The Young and the Restless spoilers shock the battle for survival. Victor Newman's fate hangs in the balance. The tension in Genoa City had never been more palpable. For decades, Victor Newman had been the backbone of the Young and the Restless, the titan of industry, the patriarch, and the force of nature that held everything together. But now, as he lay unconscious in a hospital bed, struggling between life and death, the city that once thrived under his dominance seemed to fall into a state of mourning. Rumors and speculation ran rampant among the fans. Could it be true? Could Victor Newman, the indestructible, the legendary, truly be facing his final moments? And what about Ian Ward and Jordan? Were they finally gone for good, their reign of terror over? A New Year's catastrophe had shaken Genoa City to its core, and with it, an uncertain future for its most iconic figure. The aftermath of chaos. The events leading up to this moment had been nothing short of apocalyptic. A battle of wits, betrayal, and survival had reached its boiling point. Victor Newman, the eternal strategist, had once again found himself in a deadly confrontation with Ian Ward, his old nemesis. But this time, it wasn't just about power or revenge, it was about survival. For weeks, Ian and his accomplice Jordan had been orchestrating a scheme so sinister that even Victor himself hadn't foreseen every twist. The Newman family had been under siege, their empire trembling under the weight of manipulation, deception, and well-placed threats. But Victor had never been one to back down from a fight. Then, the confrontation happened. The details were hazy, whispers of gunfire, explosions, and destruction. The Newman Ranch had become the epicenter of a final standoff, one that ended in bloodshed. By the time the authorities arrived, Ian Ward and Jordan were presumed dead. The air smelled of smoke, and the chilling echoes of the battle still lingered in the night. But Victor had paid the price. Victor's struggle between life and death. He had been found barely breathing, clutching his chest in agony. The once mighty titan had collapsed, his body betraying the iron will that had carried him through decades of wars, corporate battles, and family betrayals. Rushed to Genoa City Memorial Hospital, Victor was immediately placed under intensive care. His vitals were weak. He had suffered from severe respiratory distress, and his heart had gone into failure. It was uncertain whether it was the result of injuries sustained in the fight or if his body had finally begun to give in to years of relentless struggle. A team of doctors and surgeons was assembled, their expressions grave. Victor Newman was no ordinary patient, he was a symbol. His survival wasn't just about his own life, it was about the lives of everyone around him, including the viewers who had followed his journey for decades. The Newman family in mourning. The hospital waiting room had never felt so suffocating. Nikki Newman was inconsolable, tears streaming down her face as she clung to the hope that her husband, the love of her life, would fight through. She had seen him come back from the brink before, but this time felt different. Victoria Newman, their strong and resilient daughter, tried to keep it together, but the sight of her father in a hospital bed shattered the armor she had built over the years. Her hands trembled as she held Nikki's. Nick Newman, the ever-loyal son, stood by the door, fists clenched. He wasn't ready to lose his father. Not now. Not ever. Even Adam Newman, the black sheep of the family, had shown up. Despite their countless battles, the thought of a world without Victor Newman was something he refused to accept. Across town, Genoa City stood still. Businesses operated on autopilot. People spoke in hushed tones. The possibility of Victor Newman's death was unthinkable. He was Genoa City. Without him, what would remain? The ghosts of the past and the shadows of the future. While the Newman family grieved, the city's underbelly buzzed with speculation. If Victor Newman died, what would happen to Newman Enterprises? Would Victoria take over? Would Adam seize the moment? And what if Ian Ward and Jordan weren't actually dead? Could this be another trick, another return from the grave? Was this just the beginning of a new, more sinister era for Genoa City? Rumors began to spread. Some claimed Victor's time was up. Others refused to believe it, swearing that he would rise again, because that's what he did. But in that hospital room, as the monitors beeped steadily, one thing was certain: the world was waiting. The impossible question, can Victor Newman die? For the fans of The Young and the Restless, Victor Newman's potential death was unthinkable. He wasn't just a character, he was the heart of the show. For over 5 decades, he had been the constant, the storm, and the force of nature that kept Genoa City alive. If he died, the show would never be the same. The producers knew it. The writers knew it. The audience knew it. And yet, they had taken him to the brink. As the surgical team prepared, as Nikki prayed, and as the city held its breath, one thought echoed through the minds of millions: was this truly the end of Victor Newman? Or was this just another chapter in his legendary tale? The answer would shake The Young and the Restless to its very core. The clock is ticking. 2025 had begun with a storm of chaos. Victor's fate was uncertain, Ian Ward and Jordan might be gone, and Genoa City was left on the edge of a precipice. One thing was certain: the Newman legacy was far from over. But whether Victor Newman would live to fight another day, or whether Genoa City would be forced to say goodbye to its most powerful legend, remained the biggest question of all. And soon, the answer would come. Would Victor Newman survive? Or would the impossible finally happen? The battle for Genoa City's soul had just begun. The fall of a titan, will Victor Newman survive? The soft beeping of machines filled the sterile hospital room, an eerie reminder that Victor Newman, the indomitable force of Genoa City, now lay at the mercy of fate. Behind the closed doors of the intensive care unit, nurses and doctors moved with purpose, their faces carefully composed. No one wanted to say it out loud, but they all knew the odds were grim. Outside the room, the Newman family was falling apart. Nikki Newman, bracing for the worst. Nikki Newman stood with her arms wrapped around herself, staring at the glass doors that separated her from her husband. She had always known this day would come. Victor had defied death countless times: heart attacks, betrayals, explosions, corporate wars, but he was now over 80 years old, and even he couldn't keep fighting forever. The bullet wound in his abdomen had drained too much blood. His body, once an unshakable fortress, was losing the battle. Nikki had prepared herself for this moment. She had spent decades loving him, hating him, leaving him, and always coming back. Their love had survived more than most, but now, it was slipping through her fingers like sand. She wiped away a tear and whispered, almost to herself, "It's okay, Victor, you can let go now. You don't have to fight anymore." She had made peace with it. Or at least, she thought she had. Nick and Victoria, refusing to accept reality. Nick and Victoria stood side by side, their faces frozen in disbelief. To them, Victor Newman wasn't an old man. He wasn't someone who could die. He was a warrior, a mastermind, a legend. He wasn't weak. He wasn't frail. He wasn't someone who got shot and simply died. "He's going to wake up," Victoria whispered, gripping Nick's arm. "He always does." But Nick said nothing. His jaw was clenched so tightly that his entire body trembled. His father, the man who had built and shaped Genoa City, was helpless. And for the first time in his life, Nick realized that there was nothing he could do to fix it. Nick had spent years trying to separate himself from Victor, trying to prove that he wasn't just his father's son. But now, as he stared through the glass at that still, lifeless body, he wanted nothing more than to hear Victor's voice ordering him to be stronger. "Come on, old man, fight," Nick muttered. Victoria tightened her grip on his hand. "He's unconscious, and frankly..." He hesitated, then continued softly, "We don't know if he'll wake up." A sharp gasp came from Nikki. Nick's hands curled into fists. Victoria shook her head, refusing to believe it. Adam took a step forward. "So what are you saying, Doc? Is he dying or not?" Dr. Lanning sighed again. "If Victor doesn't regain consciousness in the next 48 hours, we'll have to discuss other options." A chill ran through the room. Other options. That was doctor code for preparing to let go. The weight of the legacy. As the Newman family tried to process the impossible, the weight of Victor's legacy loomed over them. For decades, Victor had been the ruler of Genoa City, feared and respected in equal measure. He built an empire, destroyed his enemies, and created a family that could never quite escape his shadow. And now, they faced a world where he might not be there anymore. Could Nick fill his shoes? Would Victoria take the throne? Or was this the moment Adam had been waiting for, a city without Victor, where he could finally become the man he was meant to be? Questions swirled in their minds, but none of it mattered if Victor didn't survive. Because without Victor Newman, was there even a Genoa city left? The clock is ticking as the night dragged on, the machines in Victor's room kept beeping, keeping time with the dwindling chances of his survival. The family stood outside, trapped between hope and despair, between faith and fear. Nikki clutched her wedding ring, whispering the only prayer she could think of, "Please, Victor, don't leave me." Nick stared at the floor, fists clenched. Victoria wiped away her tears, refusing to break. Adam stared at the door, his mind racing, because if Victor Newman died, everything they knew would change forever. And somewhere, deep in the shadows of Genoa City, someone was already preparing to take advantage of the chaos. The war for the Newman legacy had only just begun.